should never Google yourself. Some of us might have done it once or twice, but for Anora Petrova, one simple search led to horrifying consequences. Anora had always wanted to be an ice skater. She was young, talented, successful, and had a famous trainer. The night before her first big championship win, she felt more anxious than usual. For fun, she Googled herself and came across a Wikipedia page saying that she would win. When she did win, Anora thought this must be a coincidence. But every time after that, the page would predict whether she won or lost. She checked it every single time, almost addicted to refreshing that site. When she was about to compete in another huge competition, she decided to manipulate the website by changing the outcome it predicted. But instead, it said Anora Petrova is going to get what she deserves. Right after, she was accused of sabotaging another girl's skates, which ended up slicing her in the forehead. Even though Anora denied it, she was banned from the competition and was dropped by her trainer. She thought this must be the worst of it until she checked the website the next day and saw a terrifying message about her. Follow for part 2 of the story. This is why you should never Google yourself. Anora Petrova became obsessed with constantly refreshing a website that predicted whether or not she would win her ice skating competitions. But things took an extreme turn when she decided to manipulate the website's predictions by editing it herself. This caused her to be banned from the competition and be dropped by her trainer. But things got so much worse when she refreshed the page again and saw a terrifying message about her. This time, it said she would be an orphan. She immediately called her parents, but she only heard maniacal laughter over the phone. After her parents died of a terrible accident, the police said that there were no records of her calls to her parents at all. She became reclusive after that and moved to another country, where she tried to reinvent herself. Eventually, she stopped checking the website and things went back to normal, until she wanted to audition for the ice circus. She checked the website again to see whether or not she would make it, but it only said one thing. It said at midnight, Anora Petrova died friendless and alone. The next day, her body was found next to her computer. See a red car, don't do what he did. Once there was a man in Mexico who took a night shift at work. After work, as he was walking home, he saw a bright red car. The red car pulled up in front of him and 3 women were inside. They asked if he needed a ride home, and because he thought they were beautiful and harmless young women, he agreed. The next morning, his wife realized he never came back home. She called his work and they didn't know where he was either, so she called the police. The police then went to his workplace, which is where he was last seen, and began searching. A few miles away, they found his body. It was lying on the side of the road with strange symbols carved all over. The 3 women in the red car turned out to be witches who traveled the road looking for men, usually those who wander the streets late at night. When they found these men, they would entice them to get into their car with them, promise him they could fulfill all of his dreams, then begin their dark occult ritual where he would be sacrificed to the devil. But the most disturbing part of the story is that the bright red car that these witches were driving were painted from the blood of all of their victims.
This is the most chilling picture you will see today, and let me explain why. 18-year-old Samantha Koenig was working at her job in Anchorage, Alaska when she was abducted. Her abductor assured her over and over again that he was only abducting her for ransom. Samantha was waiting for her boyfriend to pick her up from work because she didn't have a vehicle of her own. So this man sent a text message from Samantha's phone to her boyfriend, basically letting him know that she was going away for the weekend and to let her dad know. But Samantha's boyfriend knew that this wasn't like her. And to cause more concern, her boyfriend caught a man going through his truck outside of Samantha's home. The man was searching for Samantha's debit card. Samantha's boyfriend hollered at the man and ran back inside to get help, but by the time he came back out, the man was gone. Weeks go by, and Samantha's boyfriend gets another text from her phone. This time it says, "Connor Park sign under pic of Albert. Ain't she purty?" In Anchorage, there's a park called Connor Bog Park, and at the time, there was a poster of a missing dog named Albert. So police show up to this location and they find this. A photo of Samantha holding the Anchorage Daily News and requesting that $30,000 be deposited into her account. While Samantha's father and the community come together to get this money so that Samantha can be returned home safely, they have no idea that in that picture, Samantha is already gone. She had become the victim of serial unaliver Israel Keys, who had sewn her eyes open for proof of life.
The story took place in Nador, Morocco in the year 2015. The story was submitted by Ilyas. Back in 2015, Ilyas was an 18-year-old Moroccan Muslim that lived in Norway. One night, Ilyas was back in Morocco visiting family, and he stayed up late watching a movie at home till 3 in the morning. The living room was very warm, so he got up to open the window for fresh air. As he was at the window, being at the 4th floor in that building, he looks down and the street was dark and empty, but there was one man wearing black from head to toe with a hood covering his face. He wasn't sure why that man was outside at that time. He looked away, but then peeked one last time out of curiosity. When he looked at him again, the man had his hands on a building's wall. He was strangely just feeling the wall, and out of nowhere, the man vanishes through that wall. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief after what he just witnessed. Ilyas swears that there was no door in that spot. It was just physically impossible. He forgets about this after a while and then flies back to Norway. 6 months later, in Norway, Ilyas experiences his first ever sleep paralysis, which in Islam is known as Jathum. He vividly remembers having a conversation with a dark figure, and his mom also witnessed him speak in his sleep. He woke up after the paralysis with swollen feet and rashes all over his body. They rushed to the ER, and none of the doctors could diagnose what caused his body to react that way. He was finally discharged after treatment, but after that day, Ilyas was never the same person. He always acted differently. He was antisocial. He was distant from people. And his mom always told him that he needed ruqya. A few months later, they fly back to Morocco for the next holiday season. He was always against his mother's ruqya idea. However, he decided to fight his thoughts and do it. He had a cousin that was also suffering, and she visited a raqi in Morocco quite regularly. So they went together with both of their moms. When they reached, they sat down and waited for their session. Ilyas could hear the raqi in the other room, and he felt extremely uneasy and started to sweat. The Quran recitation, the ruqya, the sounds, made him not even want to look at that direction. He was angry. He went outside for a moment to gain back his senses until their turn finally reached. The raqi called them in and started. Ilyas's cousin immediately started reacting horribly when the Quran started. She was screaming so loud. Ilyas started losing senses throughout his entire body. He was sweating. He was unable to move, and he was shouting from fear. He does pray, and he does read Quran, but he was so confused as to why he was screaming. He felt like he was being tortured. The slightest pinch from the raqi felt like it was a knife stab. It was very powerful, and this is where he felt a jinn's presence inside of him. The following night was the most horrific night for Ilyas. For a whole week, the man was not able to sleep alone, and he would get mentally abused by these demons haunting him. Weeks go by. Ilyas started getting demonic thoughts of harming his own family. He hated everyone. When he would look at his own sister, her face would seem distorted to him. He knows these beings are playing with his head. His whole life turned upside down. He would regularly think of harming his own family, but luckily, he never did. A few months later, Ilyas was back in Norway, and life was back to normal. He was relieved that he was in a good state of mind and that the horror was over. At the time, he worked at a local grocery store. After a Christmas celebration at work, which he did not participate in, it was late at night. He was walking one of his colleagues back home from work. She was a young woman, and she was scared to walk alone. After they reached outside her place, she asked him, "Where's that other girl that was with us?" "What girl?" Ilyas asked. "There was no one there. It was just you and I." She swore that there was another woman with black hair, pale skin, standing next to him the whole time, staring at Ilyas's colleague with anger. Even though this entity gave Ilyas a break, this jinn was still around, haunting everyone that has intentions towards Ilyas.
I never knew a kid could be this evil. 12-year-old Gabriel Kuhn and 16-year-old Daniel Petrie were friends who played a game together called Tibia. One day, Gabriel borrowed some in-game money from Daniel and decided not to pay it back when Daniel asked for it. Daniel became furious. He snuck into Gabriel's home when he was alone, viciously attacked him, dragged him in the bed, and began to violate him. Once he pulled up his pants, Gabriel threatened to tell his parents. You see, Daniel couldn't have that, so Daniel strangled Gabriel till he thought he was dead. Then he began to chop Gabriel's legs off to hide the body. But Gabriel wasn't dead. He woke up in the middle of his legs being chopped off and started screaming. This excited Daniel so much that he kept cutting while Gabriel was awake. Daniel only ended up serving 3 years of social educational punishment, and when released was never seen again. His last words to the judge were, "Gabriel was a thief. He burns in hell where I sent him. When I die, I will find him in hell and finish my revenge."